Hello and welcome to Bot Populi. Bot Populi is an alternative media platform dedicated to looking at all things digital from a social justice and global south perspective. We're now also a podcast. I'm your host Tanvi Kanchan, and this week we're starting with episode 1 of our first mini-series, The Davos Diaries, where we'll be training a critical eye on the World Economic Forum and their annual meeting in Davos. Through interviews with prominent individuals from civil society, we'll examine the concept of multi-stakeholderism, the growing influence of big tech on global governance, and the future of tech policy in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's start with the most pressing question. What exactly is the World Economic Forum, and what happens at their annual meeting in Davos every January? Let's first hear from Harris Gleckman, author of Multi-Stakeholder Governance and Democracy, A Global Challenge, who's been working on issues of multinationalism and the environment, and has worked with the United Nations for more than 20 years.
The World Economic Forum has a very interesting history. It started as a meeting of the elite, primarily from the business community, but from governments in Europe. And over time, it expanded to become an international meeting. The World Economic Forum itself is a business that brings together corporate leaders in government, and they, that is the forum, also invites civil society people whom they want to hear and they want to give a platform to. They invite academics in the same way. They invite media personnel to come and discuss global issues.
Here's what Renata Avila, Guatemalan human rights lawyer, leader of the A+ Alliance for Inclusive Algorithms, and founder and CEO of the Polylateral Association, has to add.
It involves all the economic elites, and it is trying to basically organize all the economic elites to head in the same direction and stop fighting with each other, competing with each other, and try to work on a common program. So far, so good. It sounds good, the problem is that it's for elites only. That's the problem. That's the main problem of the forum. And the problem is that it's not plural. I mean, it is one vision for all the elites all over the world without democratic discussion and without necessarily the diversity that different movements and different layers of society will bring. That's what it is. It has been going on for a long time. And it's very stable, I will say. It's very stable. This year will be the first time in a long time that the January meeting does not happen face to face. But it grew in influence, and over time it became an informal place where decisions were made.
The WEF has been commonly characterized as more akin to an annual party, where deals are brokered that then make their way into formal governance spaces. Uruguayan journalist Roberto Bissio, who coordinates the Secretariat of Social Watch and has been involved in organizing around global issues, describes it as a billionaires club.
When you look at it, at the end of the day, the WF, the World Economic Forum, is not much more than a club that organizes a yearly party. It takes no resolutions during those gatherings and those parties. It offers a program of an enormous variety of conference talks and shows and whatever, where the people attending, which pay quite dearly for their tickets, can choose to attend or not. And because those people with a lot of money and a lot of power go in, other people with power also go in, prime ministers, presidents, ministers of different kinds, the heads of institutions, the Secretary General of the United Nations, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, and so on, also go there, and then all of a sudden is that everybody that matters in the world or in the world's decision-making gathers there. And then you want to have a chance to talk to them, which is what people actually pay for. It's not for the conferences that they're going to hear. if we look at it, why Davos is moving to Singapore and postponing its date? Why not have it as a video conference? Everything in the world in these days is happening through video conferences, including the General Assembly of the United Nations, the meeting of the G20, of the heads of states, and so on. They all happen through video conference, but not Davos. Why? And the point is that what matters about Davos is the coffee breaks or the champagne breaks, caviar or whatever, or chocolate. It's Switzerland after all. So whatever it is that they drink, but it's that drink. It's the casual or not so casual encounters. It's when the CEO of Facebook meets with the prime minister that is trying to censor Facebook, or so they feel, and this and that people, leaders, and so on, meet informally, casually, or bilaterally, off the record, of course, and that's where things happen. And you cannot do that in a video conference. And so that is the main reason why this is being postponed and it's going to be held in Singapore. But it's also the main reason of what's the importance of Davos. So it's an interesting process because no decisions, as we said, are made there, but a lot of things are cooked there.
Chee Yoke Ling, Executive Director of Third World Network, an international organization based in Malaysia that focuses on developing countries and Southern perspectives in international law, policymaking, and sustainable development, believes that civil society needs to raise their voice not just at the table, but also on the streets.
So what does WEF do every year in Davos? Bring people together, heads of states, all these politicians who don't know details, right? And then get them into this Davos situation. They all, spend a week together and everybody feels good. And then you get them to politically commit to things. You set up meetings, you're a broker. And then they go back and then they start going into negotiations. So for me, the WEF is actually it's not a governance forum that we believe in as global governance. It tries to substitute interstate governmental responsibility in the public sphere of the United Nations, for example. And the more we look to that as the place that we have to engage, the more we give it legitimacy and credibility. And this has been the debate for civil society from day one. When they started inviting some civil society groups like Greenpeace, even Third World Network, my director was invited because of the noise and the injustice that we were screaming about outside, where we were fighting trade agreements, economic, and IMF and all these hardcore economic issues. They were worried about the civil society on the streets against WTO. So they invited some people to go to Davos, thinking they could neutralize us, but they haven't. No, when I say we shouldn't give it legitimacy, I'm not saying that it is not influential. It is very influential, unfortunately, right? And they have, over the years, they've actually begun to package themselves much, much more slickly and actually shape the discourse.
Davos has evolved and expanded over the years, but has always been focused on emerging global problems that threaten the neoliberal status quo. Harris explains further.
Now, the annual meeting in Davos is the one that gets the greatest attention, but Davos has expanded considerably over its 45, 50 years now to having a series of regional meetings of roughly the same size. And the crucial character of these Davos gatherings is that the corporations themselves pay handsomely to attend to underwrite the business of the World Economic Forum. And they are expecting to meet other corporate executives to discuss issues of interest between the different firms, between senior parts of government, and with senior civil society and academics. Davos, in some ways, is extremely cutting edge, and one must give them a lot of credit. Every year, they identify somewhere between 30 and 50 topics, which they see as challenges to the world. And they invite people to come to discuss those topics. And in doing so, they're helping to develop a strategy about how to respond to these new and emerging issues, or issues for which the corporate world feels threatened by. And this opportunity is and the scoping of these issues is extremely brilliant. They are amongst the places where you can look back and say 5 years ago, they identified an issue. And they've been working on issues of internet governance for 20 some odd years or more. And it's this process of identifying issues of global importance and to begin to construct a consensus of views amongst the global elites from different sectors. That is the way in which Davos begins to function, or has been functioning, as a governance body.
Barbara Adams, who's worked for the UN and now monitors it on global economic issues, reflects further on the nature of this evolution of Davos and the WEF in general, and how it connects to the changing role of the state.
Well, Davos, I think next year, we're on the verge of it, is going to be the 50th anniversary of the World Economic Forum. And it is, and started very much as its name implies, as a forum of, if you like, the captains, the power centers in the economy, to meet each year. And I think it was more of a kind of a networking club orientation. It's evolved enormously since then with its annual meetings up until next year in Davos. And it's evolved to the extent through phases where, and when would I say this happened? This must have happened 2-3 decades ago. The heads of state and government were invited and went to Davos. And you saw a big shift in it becoming not only a center for large private sector engagement, for-profit engagement, but also public. So you had the public and private sectors meeting. And in fact, one of the things that happened in 1999 was that the Secretary General of the United Nations, who was invited to Davos, went to Davos, and has quite often, the Secretaries General have been going since. And we're now at an interesting situation, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about this a little bit more, where also representatives of civil society organizations are being invited and are going to Davos. And that is also quite a big change. In one of the meetings, the World Economic Forum in the 90s, I think it was, the World Social Forum, I don't know if you know of it, was basically timed at exactly the same dates as a counter, as an alternative, that this is where we should be and this is what we should be discussing, not at the World Economic Forum. Now that sort of parallel, that challenge is not taking those same kinds of forms. But I think I want to, the evolution of the forum is very noticeable over its lifetime. But within it, there are still some very, very clear things which are manifest. And the very first one is their emphasis on voluntary governance. It is a place where people talk about the big issues of the day, but they discuss with each other which ones, how to make progress, as if they have a choice, whether or not to engage in governance like this or governance like that. And the other thing that we have to acknowledge over its evolution, and I would be hesitant to attribute Davos itself to this influence, but I certainly would attribute the people who go to Davos as having had this influence, albeit in a variety of ways. One of the things we have to also recognize is the enormous shift in the role of the state during this period of time, where the state is no longer the provider of the quality of governance and seems to have become more the manager of the different sectors of society to engage with each other, as if we all have equal opportunity and equal space to shape how we are governed. And I think we all clearly know that's not true.
The WEF has also been the space where ideas like that of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and more recently the Great Reset have taken shape. Jim Thomas, who works with the Etc. Group, a 45-year-old international organization that tracks new trends in food and agriculture, emerging technologies, and corporate power concentration, explains what exactly these concepts are.
I work with the Etc. Group. We track new technologies and sort of power and way in which corporations try to take over, for example, food systems. And, like many civil society organizations, the World Economic Forum has been very much an entity we've been watching for many years. It's, people know Davos as a place where billionaires come together with select world leaders to sort of talk about the future of the world. But it's really a club that's pushing a very particular agenda, a neoliberal agenda about freeing up markets and pushing certain corporate interests. And about, I would say, 4 or 5 years ago, Davos, which has always been a space for talking about big picture discussions, began really focusing in and honing in on this question of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And that then became the constant theme because of its founder, Klaus Schwab, saying that the world's about to enter this big technologically driven change around artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, synthetic biology, and so forth, and really trumpeting that as a grand, new, and exciting future for the planet. And so, in some ways, the World Economic Forum has increasingly become a driving push to create the changes needed, the governance changes needed to allow this this next industrial shift. And the meeting that's coming up in January is the regular meeting, as I understand it, of the World Economic Forum. Of course, it will be online rather than in person because of the pandemic. And in the context of the pandemic, the World Economic Forum is talking not just about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, but trying to grab the shock of this moment to drive a great reset. And that great reset is basically what they've been saying for many years, that to forge ahead with neoliberal policies and with this idea of a technologically driven revolution. So the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the idea that you have these powerful platform technologies coming together in a way that will significantly shift every part of society and economy is fundamentally right, as far as we're concerned. And it's been talked about by governments since the turn of the millennium. Back then, the US government talked about nano, bio, info, cogno convergence, the coming together of nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technologies, and cognitive technologies, that is AI. And that by about 2015, they expected that to be driving massive disruptions in a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And roughly speaking, we're seeing that happen. We're seeing, artificial intelligence emerge as something that shifts potentially every area of the economy. We're seeing radical biotechnologies, whether that's synthetic biology, CRISPR, and so forth, really upturning what that means for agriculture, for conservation, and so forth. And the difference being, of course, that the World Economic Forum sees this as an intrinsically good thing, and they want to shape the disruption that's coming. And from Etc. Group's point of view, we would see that as disruption as something that almost never helps the poor, it almost never helps the marginalized. It disrupts, upturns, and in breaking apart society in various ways. It's the corporate leaders who drive that, who try to take advantage for their own interest. And that takes us to the Great Reset. At a moment of massive shock, which the pandemic moment is, the World Economic Forum and those who it serves see the opportunity to harness that shock for their own interest. And the policies that they're putting forward in this moment are exactly the same policies they've always put forward. They're a warmed over version of the same neoliberal sort of techno-elitist, if you like, view of how the world could work in their interest, all dressed up as a sort of green response to the shock that people are experiencing.
Renata, Harris, and Barbara all tell us a little more about this idea of the Great Reset.
It is again very superficial. It is they packaged lots of initiatives that were in the works, and because many things that the society was not receptive before the pandemic, now they are very receptive to, like accelerated digitization and so on. It is a way of marketing lots of initiatives in a big change that changes nothing. Because the Great Reset is like you restart the computer to run the programs as they were running before. Like that's basically my analogy. This Great Reset is just turning on and turning off and turning on again. And the same machine is not responding to a different logic. It aspects like data extractivism and surveillance that remain intact or even more strong, and it is nice words, very little substance.
Davos folks have realized, as well as others have outside, that the concept of globalization has been delegitimized in a wide range of areas, starting with the 2008-2009 economic crisis. And it was around that crisis, worried about delegitimation of globalization, that Davos actually published its most detailed work on multi-stakeholder governance. Now they're looking around the world at the impact of COVID and the impact of COVID on the economy of the world. And they realize, again, that the whole concept of globalization as a good is no longer being welcomed because the system is failing to take care of the physical health of people and the economic health of people. And what they are brilliant at is identifying these kinds of global and regional interests, which are challenges to the world. But then what they want to do is to come up with responses which preserve the function of the market or expand the areas where individual firms can create niche and specialized markets. And so the Great Reset addresses both of these features. It addresses the anxiety of the elite that the ideological, the social structure of globalization isn't working, and it seeks to come up with responses that still maintains that the market is the way to solve these questions, and perhaps expand the scope of the market for certain firms. And so the Great Reset is this package of ideas. But one also has to say that so far, Davos has not really cracked this nut. They haven't figured out how it is possible to engender a new love, as it were, for globalization in this extent of the devastation from COVID and the economic consequences from COVID. And they haven't figured out how to create new products, new processes to make this, in their language, a business opportunity. They won't say that particularly, but that's what it is that they are doing.
I think one of the things that one needs to unpack more when we talk about the Great Reset is this about wanting to affect a shift within the for-profit sector, to move away from fossil fuels, for example, in their language, to the green economy and so on, the Green New Deal? And to what extent is this a shift back to a different approach to governance, more regulation? I think it's the first and not the second.
The WEF has been termed as illegitimate, such as by Andreas Missbach in 2006, who drew attention to the fact that large corporations set the agenda at Davos, while politicians only figure as minority partners. Ultimately, Even though the WEF does not really contribute to binding policies, the forum exerts great influence over global governance. Roberto tells us why that is.
They've been effective in a way to pass as common sense some of the things that they were proposing and to get them enshrined into international laws. But it is the legitimate institutions, it is the political leaders that have decided nationally and internationally to take those decisions that favor the people at Davos. And I think our conversation has to go back and forth between one and the other. It's not the club and the yearly festival what really matters, or it only matters in that the new ideas are being put forward, but those are just ideas until they become political decisions.
It's clear that civil society's concern with Davos and the WEF is not unfounded, especially as we move into a new global and technological era shaped by the COVID-19 pandemic. What does the future hold for multilateralism and tech policy? How is multi-stakeholderism changing global governance? And how does big tech play into all of this? Stay tuned for the next episode in the series, where we'll explore all of these questions and more. This has been episode 1 of the Davos Diaries, a podcast mini-series by Populi. Set up in 2018 by 7 organizations from across the globe, Populi is an alternative media platform that's reframing the conversation on digital justice and critically examining the new contours of our digitalizing world. Populi's founding members are the Latin American Information Agency, Data Justice Lab, Development Alternatives with Women for a New Era, Derechos Digitales, Internet Lab, IT for Change, and the JustNet Coalition. Engage with more of our work on botpopuli.net.